Anyone that knows me or knows this channel knows this wasn't going to get by without me posting my thoughts on it. And welcome back to the heart of the stories we tell. I'm Rob the host, and this is another look deep into what makes a story, a theory on storytelling by a storyteller who believes that every story has merit. And tonight's episode is the G.I. Joe reboot. But before we get into that, this is the 51st week of me making videos. So while it's not quite time to celebrate yet, it's getting closer. And as we do, I want to take a look at what was good and bad about everything we've done this year. And don't forget the fact that I've been trying to build up a community. So if you could give me a little bit of help here and subscribe and like and share this video, I want to try to get everything going. And in the next coming weeks, we're going to be talking about my Patreon changing up. But okay, G.I. Joe. And we all know this isn't the first time I talked about it. I used the adaptation video to talk about how it's been adapted many times. And in this day and age, if we're going for a millennial approach, it already had a huge diversity. I mean, yeah, the modern toys have male and female, black and white, but let's be honest, the team was never exactly just white men. In fact, just in the original 13, there was a pretty cool character that wasn't, or two. Now, I'm not going to say that means that Cobra and G.I. Joe were always PC and weren't kinda having some issues with stereotyping, but especially when it comes to sexual identity, the idea of the women were kicking just as much ass as the men was true from issue 1, cartoon 1, every movie. And to be honest, my favorite character is one of the women, although maybe that's sexist in and of itself, so maybe we'll leave my weird cartoon fetish for the Baroness out of this. So for right now, we're going to together talk about what I'd like to see in a movie and what they could do and how they could change things to make this a millennial powerhouse movie. Of course, the best part about being a millennial series is that Snake Eyes doesn't need to be a ninja, because all the Cobra people will just be staring at their phones all day, right? Alright, I promise that's the only millennial joke I'll make. Alright, I probably shouldn't make a promise I can't keep. Anyway, we have other villains other than Cobra we could explore. The Red Shadows are the Action Force enemy, plus there's about a dozen others. And to be perfectly honest, the truth of this series is that we have hundreds of villains that we could use, even just real-life terrorists. But as we look at the previous adaptations, you'll find that there aren't actually that many duplicate characters, for the most part. They use different characters in each interpretation of the series, starting first with the comics and then the cartoons and the movies. The characters we really see duplicated are Cobra Commander, Baroness as villains, and as heroes, Scarlet and Snake Eyes. Now there's a little bit of catch over here and there, but realistically, that's it. Now that we know where we've been, and where everything for adaptation has gone before, we can switch from knowing to fighting the new fight. The characters don't really matter, and to be honest, there are a lot of people that are going to say, oh, we should have the original characters, the ones that started off in the comic. And of course, there are going to be people that are going to push for fan favorites, for equipment and characters. But again, those 13 characters, where yes, they started it all and definitely deserve credit, aren't what most of us remember. We remember the cartoons, plural. We remember the last set of movies. There's a huge set of characters, heroes and villains alike, that we could pull from. And I think we should. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. As keen as I would be on just talking this entire couple of hours away, going into minute detail of how I would write a G.I. Joe movie, instead I just want to go through the basics, the way I do when I review. So let's talk about what elements of fiction I think they need, and we'll start with the setting. G.I. Joe has never been a realistic fighting force. They have ninjas, they have pets, they fight bears, they get healed by super weird alien-like giants in the wilderness. They have sci-fi, they have fantasy, they have giant snake monsters fighting giant robots, they have accelerator suits, they have Mobat tanks, they have mass devices, and weather dominators. So I want all of that to be taken into account. The setting needs to look realistic, but not be real. We need there to be enough room in there for this to be a fantasy. For all intents and purposes, this is 1 foot in the sci-fi category, or at least I think it should. Now that's not to say that I want everything to be. I want there to be realistic action, and the characters need to be down home. So let's switch over to them. What character should they use? And the first question is, how badass is Snake Eyes? And he better be super badass. At first he's a commando, and then he went because his best friend was a ninja and trained with him, and they actually gave him the title of the comic for the longest time. And let's be honest, ninjas are kind of in right now. And on top of that, he had the best issue. And he's one of the original 13, so he almost definitely has to make the cut as one of the only two that actually was in every adaptation. I would go with Scarlet as well. What about the rest of these guys? Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, we don't need to do original 13. You could probably have a 5 or 6 man team drawn from the best of these guys. Some of the craziest, I mean, personally, I would, of course, go with Duke and Stalker, but you could use just about anyone. Maybe not Sergeant Slaughter. Sergeant Slaughter would be weird since it wouldn't be being played by Sergeant Slaughter. But you just pick a cast of a handful. Like I said up top, diversity is your friend, and there's quite a few characters. My personal pick, Duke, Stalker, Snake Eyes, Scarlet, Covergirl, Spirit, Beachhead, Roadblock, and maybe Flint. Possibly Shipwreck. Why those characters? They're the ones that I find the most fun and easy to write for. But again, you don't need to stick by my thing. Any set of characters, as long as it's small, would do. As much as I would mix and match characters, I'd mix and match story as well. Lady Doomsday from the comic has a great thing. And when you think about it, the HARP system is already believed to be a weather control device. So we could mix and match pieces of Weather Dominator, Mass Device, and Lady Doomsday all into one story. And since we're not limited to which characters we're using, we could even use advanced Cobra troops, because Cobra could already be well established by this point, as could G.I. Joe. So Lady Doomsday starts off on a train with a scientist who is the aforementioned Lady Doomsday, and she's in trouble because she was building a super weapon for the US and gets kidnapped by Cobra. Well, we can still do that. Just she was building the HARP and the Weather Dominator. And then, Cobra getting their hands on them institutes the beginning of the Joe team. The Joe team gets put together as a response team. They go out after Cobra. They get her back, but just in time. And unfortunately, she already leaked the secrets. So they need to go after Cobra one more time at their secondary base. Because, boom, Cobra's already built this super weapon. And of course, through all this, we have a badass combo ninja commando dude. But we also have all the other characters we can flesh out on both sides. Because my first and foremost belief is we need people we can root for on G.I. Joe, but we need people we can get to know on Cobra. I would personally pick 2 or 3 Joes and pretty much follow them. The beginning of the story would start with General Hawk and General Flag, and then move into, in my movie, probably following Duke and Spirit. But you just pick a couple Joes, and then have a couple Cobra agents that you follow around too. One of the most important things for point of view, though, is we need Cobra Commander and Destro playing off each other like they did in the comics and cartoons, not in 2 separate places. If in this day and age you can't do theme and symbolism up the butt for a G.I. Joe show, you're no writer worth your salt. Seriously, we have some patriotism, we have some war, we have war is hell, we have war is necessary. I mean, those are just ones that jump right off the top of my head. Strangers becoming brothers in a foxhole, love stories that you can tell between both Cobra and G.I. Joe, and this quote, which was changed from what Hama originally wrote. Now, our job is to follow orders and do the impossible and make it look easy, is badass. But what he originally wrote was even more so. In Lady Doomsday, there's a moment when the original 13 heroes are all gathered together and find out that this woman who was about to testify about a weapon made by the US government that shouldn't have been, sits there and goes, "So what, you want us to assassinate her?" And he goes, "No, we're the heroes. We can't do that. We're the USA. We have to rescue a US citizen." Like, well, why? Well, maybe for the glory? No, we're not doing this for glory, Hawk tells them. Hawk tells them exactly what he thinks. Now, like I said, it was rewritten as this, but years later, Hama told us it was originally supposed to read more like this. Our jobs are to go and do the impossible, and then sleek away into the shadows. We're not going to get famous. We're not going to be heroes. We're just going to be some Joes. in a GI uniform. And I mean, hell, in my opinion, that's the name of the team right there, and that's why they go with that name. Because that's all they are, a bunch of Joes. And that's part of the theme as well. These aren't just any heroes. These are the heroes you could actually be if you enlisted. But to address that elephant in the room, G.I. Joe is the American highly trained special mission force. How do you sell this series overseas if it's all about American-centric? Well, first I have to ask how you sold movies overseas all the time like that, but that's not the important part. The important part is how we integrate other countries. We say the Joe team isn't alone. We say there are other response teams. The Chinese have a response team. The Israelis have a response team. The Brazilians have a response team. The Russians have the October Guard. And we make sure and mention throughout all of this and have these other teams help, not as part of G.I. Joe, but as equals. Have the first half of the movie be the rescue mission, and have that be in somewhere in the Middle East. And as such, the Israelis are helping us. And maybe the Chinese there too. Have the second half be them retreating to Siberia, and as such we need the October Guard. There's 100 different possible ways you could do this, and that introduces whole new sets of characters you can use. Now you're going to see that this isn't as in detail as some of my other pitches, and there's a reason. Because at some point I think I am going to fully pitch what I think G.I. Joe should do, which I think is a Netflix series, similar to Voltron or Lemony Snicket's or any of those. I think that would be much better for the series and the toy line and just Hasbro in general. But I'm also going to be looking into possibly starting up a second channel just talking about G.I. Joe things. A friend of mine and I were going to review all of the comics that have come out and maybe the cartoons as well, along with talk about some of the new toys and some of the crazier, more out there storylines. So watch for an announcement of that in the next couple of weeks as I branch out, because I want this to maintain my channel to explore the heart of all the stories. But that one might just focus a little more in-depthly on G.I. Joe or maybe just 80s cartoons in general. For now, like always, it's time for me to ask you to like and share this video and subscribe to this channel to help me build this community, because I think that there's a beauty in all of the stories that we can tell. Now, like I said up top, this is getting close to the year-end mark, so keep an eye out because you're definitely going to want to watch the 52nd and 53rd episodes, which will be coming up in the next 2 weeks.